My name is Cindy, a 35-year-old office worker. I met my husband Joe through a colleague at work, sort of a blind date, and we ended up getting married. Joe and I are the same age and share similar hobbies, so I anticipated a joyful life together. Joe's parents were cheerful and kind. My mother-in-law once said, "We were worried because Joe hadn't brought home a single potential bride until now. Please take good care of Joe." Her words stung a bit, considering I'm his age too, but I chose to ignore it. A year has passed since our wedding. Though we sometimes argued, and Joe would often bring up divorce during those moments, I thought it was just part of married life. Despite this, we generally got along well. On weekends, we enjoyed driving and taking day trips, a hobby we had shared even before getting married. While I used to travel alone frequently, we now did everything as a couple. Joe lived with his parents until we got married, using their car when he went out. Since then, we've been using my car, which is nearing its end. I originally drove a compact car because I liked the design and rarely had passengers, but I was now considering buying a new one before the next inspection. When I discussed this with Joe, he agreed, saying, "It's your car, so do as you like. But if you're going to replace it, why not get a larger car instead of a compact?" I agreed with his suggestion. The following weekend, we went to look at cars together. As we began looking at cars, Joe grew increasingly excited. He pointed out an expensive model, praising its performance, spacious interior, and overall quality. Despite its appeal, I hesitated due to the high costs, which I hadn't planned for. Joe suggested, "How about I take out a loan in my name? We both drive about the same amount, and the payments would come from our household budget." Although it didn't matter who took the loan, his suggestion seemed practical, and we decided to explore that option. We looked at other cars, but we liked the first one best and decided on it. However, the loan application in Joe's name was denied, likely because he had just changed jobs. Joe became angry and snapped at the clerk, "I'm saying I'll buy it. Can't you do something about it?" This is one of the things I dislike about Joe. He often has a condescending attitude towards staff, no matter the store. When I tried to calm him down, he got upset and went outside to smoke. Joe can be domineering and quick to threaten divorce when things don't go his way, which is exhausting. I apologized profusely to the salesperson. Maybe it would be easier to get a loan for a smaller amount. If the car is cheaper, I could pay in full, I suggested while consulting with the salesperson. Just then, Joe returned. "Hey, why not buy it under Cindy's name? I'll be the one paying anyway," he said, leaving me to ponder the situation. Actually, I found Joe's suggestion appealing. None of the other cars resonated with me the same way. I nodded and signed the documents. They said it would take a few months for the car to be delivered. In the meantime, I drove around in my old car, cherishing our last moments together. One day, as my husband sat in the passenger seat, fiddling with his smartphone, he remarked, "Finally bidding farewell to this cramped space, huh?" During the drive, I let him take the wheel and casually glanced at his phone left on the dashboard. A message caught my eye. "Did you get a new car? And it's a luxury car at that." It was from one of Joe's colleagues. Joe seemed to be showing off our new car. Given his vanity, he likely hadn't mentioned that the car was purchased under my name. Though I thought it mattered, this car ultimately changed our fate. 3 months later, the first place we went in our newly delivered car was to my in-laws' house. We visited to celebrate my father-in-law's retirement, a visit my husband always emphasized as important to honor his parents. When my father-in-law greeted us, he excitedly examined the car and exclaimed, "So this is the new car. It's so cool." I suggested, "Let's go out together in it next time," to which he responded with delight. My mother-in-law also chimed in, "I want to go too. How about a spa trip?" She seemed excited, so I started making plans, taking their wishes into account. At my in-laws, we had a wonderful time reminiscing about my father-in-law's work and my husband's childhood. One memorable comment from my mother-in-law was, "I really wanted a daughter. I thought it would be fun to go out and share clothes with her, but instead, I gave birth to Big Joe." She then added, "So Cindy, if you don't mind, let's go out together next time." I was thrilled. However, my husband didn't seem to find this amusing. Although my mother-in-law was only joking and hadn't implied he was unwanted, he sulked. Before we got married, I found his pouting cute, but it has become a bit annoying with how frequently it happens. Perhaps because his parents were present, my husband refrained from saying anything, but he often used the threat of divorce to manipulate me into compliance. Despite the tension, we managed to navigate the situation and returned home. The following day, after returning from work, my husband entered the living room and announced, "The luxury car you bought will be a gift for my dad. If you disagree, we might as well divorce, right?" Initially, I thought he was joking and tried to brush it off, but it became evident he was dead serious. "Wait, why are you bringing this up now?" I asked, puzzled. Dad was eyeing that car with envy. The best way to honor my parents' retirement is by gifting him that car and letting him enjoy it, he insisted firmly. I was taken aback by his sudden demand, but Joe remained adamant and refused to compromise. He's always been stubborn, and there are moments when he becomes irate if I don't go along with his wishes. Annoyed, I attempted to reason with him, saying, "We agreed to spend time with your father together, didn't we? Giving the car as a gift is..." But he wasn't open to discussion. The argument escalated, and Joe began to lose his temper. As their only son, I feel it's my duty to give something back to Mom and Dad. I want them to appreciate having a son, not a daughter. Joe seemed still affected by his mother's comment about wishing for a daughter. Perhaps he felt competitive after his mother expressed interest in going out with me. I was stunned. We couldn't possibly afford to give such an expensive gift. Why don't we plan a trip to a hot spring resort instead? We talked about this yesterday, didn't we? But Joe remained dissatisfied, glaring at me. "I married you, a woman past her prime, didn't I? You have nothing to boast about. Do you even realize who is responsible for the life we're leading? Just once, listen to what I have to say." His harsh words chilled my feelings for Joe instantly. Past her prime, huh? I was aware of it, but hearing someone else say it was infuriating. After all, I managed the household chores, which put me in a better position than Joe, who couldn't do much around the house. Besides, I was also contributing financially, and our livelihood didn't depend solely on Joe's salary. With these thoughts, the aspects of Joe that grated on me began to surface. His treatment of waitstaff, his tendency to sulk, his stubbornness. I had tried to overlook these traits, but now they were starting to wear on me. As these thoughts churned in my mind, Joe left the room and returned with something in his hand. "Ha!" I exclaimed when he handed me divorce papers. As I looked up in surprise, he said, "Just sign the car ownership transfer document. If you're not okay with it, you can fill out the divorce papers and leave. It's up to you." To my disbelief, the divorce papers were already filled out. "That's enough," I muttered, feeling fed up. "Fine." As I signed the document, Joe nodded with satisfaction, casually discarding the divorce papers and retreating to his room. The next day, Joe handed me the necessary documents for the car's title transfer, asking, "Can we transfer the title even though we just took out a loan?" I took the documents, pondering his question. To be certain, I decided to consult the dealership where we purchased the car. It turned out that transferring the title while a loan was still active posed significant challenges. Additionally, since the ownership change required my father-in-law's approval, it couldn't be the surprise gift Joe envisioned. Besides, my father-in-law had never expressed a desire for a car. I thought if I explained this to Joe, he might abandon the idea. I also explored the option of selling the car. Now that it felt tainted by our recent conflict, I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep driving it. The model was popular, and production couldn't keep up with demand, so selling it could fetch a high price. With that money, I could pay off the loan and choose a new car that I truly liked. When I arrived home from work and explained to Joe the complications of changing the car's title due to the loan, he responded sharply, "Then we'll just have to buy another car. Dad will be thrilled for sure." "I'm sorry, but Dad never expressed a desire for a car," I countered. "Well, then it looks like we're really going to get divorced," Joe muttered before storming off to his room. I reached my breaking point. I had been willing to work through things if he apologized, but I couldn't continue the marriage under these circumstances. I made the decision to pack my belongings. Simultaneously, I arranged to sell the car. The dealership offering the highest price agreed to collect it at a later date. A sense of relief washed over me. I planned to move out while Joe was at work the following week, putting an end to everything. With this resolve in mind, I finished my shift on Friday and returned home, only to find the car missing from its usual spot in the parking lot. "What?" I hurried inside to check if the car keys were still where I left them. "They're gone." Panic set in as I dialed Joe's number repeatedly. Despite my efforts, he didn't answer, nor did he read my messages asking him to contact me. Did Joe take the car somewhere? But that car is already. 3 hours later, I finally received a message from him. He explained he was on a trip with a colleague and suggested we both needed time to cool down. What? I exclaimed involuntarily, my voice rising as I stared at my phone screen in frustration. If Joe was on a trip, it meant he wouldn't be back tonight. I wasted no time and swiftly set my plans into motion, plans I had carefully laid out over the past few days. I called a real estate agent I knew from work and finalized the lease on the apartment he had reserved for me. I also arranged for a moving company to relocate all my belongings, furniture, appliances, everything. By the next morning, the movers had efficiently packed and transported everything to my new place. By mid-afternoon, I had settled into my new life. With the weight lifted off my shoulders, I found myself dozing off. Suddenly, my phone rang, startling me awake. It was Joe calling. He must have returned home, discovered my absence, and was likely taken aback enough to call. I couldn't help but smirk a little as I answered the phone. "Cindy, can you help me?" Joe's voice came through the phone, frantic and alarmed. It was clear he wasn't at home. "I had an accident, and my insurance isn't covering it." Confused, I replied, "What?" Joe's frustration grew evident. "That's why the new car's insurance. I called them after the accident, but they're saying it's not covered." As I pieced together his words, realization dawned. "What do you mean you had an accident? Where are you? Are you hurt?" I asked, attempting to sound concerned despite my mixed emotions. It wasn't my fault. The other party wasn't paying attention. But more importantly, what about the insurance? Joe sighed heavily. "I thought I made myself clear, didn't I? I told you not to use the car for now, Joe. You said you understood it, right? So why did you take it out without asking? We agreed to let each other know when using the car separately. Does none of that matter now?" Cindy took over, calling the insurance company from my end. Hearing the word accident made me nervous, but if he had the energy to shout, it probably wasn't too serious. I calmly laid out the situation. The car was reported stolen. When I got home, it was gone, so I reported it to the police. In fact, it was scheduled to be sold today, and now you're telling me there's been an accident. What am I supposed to do? I canceled the insurance because the sale was finalized. I canceled it when I told you not to touch the car. Upon hearing this, my husband, or rather, my soon-to-be ex-husband, began to panic. "Whoa, wait a minute. Even if I was driving our car, it shouldn't be reported stolen, Cindy. Please withdraw the theft report first. I understand about the insurance. We can discuss the financials when I get back home." But I couldn't simply accept his words. "By the way, I almost forgot to mention, you and I are now strangers. I filed for divorce 3 days ago, and it's been approved. Also, I'm not living in that house anymore." He shouted these words over the phone, but I hung up anyway. After hanging up, his calls continued relentlessly, so I eventually turned off my phone to get some peace. The next day, I took a day off from work to organize my room. When I switched my phone back on in the morning, it was flooded with missed calls from my ex-husband. There was even a call around 1 a.m., likely when he returned home. But he was the one who hastily filed for divorce, and he was the one who used divorce as a threat. If he believed that mentioning divorce would make me comply with his demands, he was mistaken. Initially, when we first married, I might have given in to avoid the embarrassment of divorce so soon after tying the knot at 35. Perhaps that's why he assumed I would comply again. However, as I sorted through my room and reflected on everything, all those pent-up frustrations finally pushed me past my hesitations. My phone rang again. Assuming it was my ex-husband, I checked, only to see it was a call from my mother-in-law. "I received a call from Joe yesterday. He mentioned something about an accident and you leaving, but I couldn't make sense of it." "What's going on?" she asked, concerned. I took a deep breath and explained everything to her. "I apologize to you and father-in-law, but the divorce is final. Regarding the money for the car and dividing our belongings, I'm planning to arrange a meeting to discuss it soon." Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law apologized profusely and said, "If it's all right with you, could I attend that meeting?" I'm worried Joe might say something unreasonable. I agreed to hold the post-divorce meeting at my in-laws' house. When I visited my in-laws after a long while, I found my father-in-law scolding my ex-husband. My mother-in-law noticed my arrival and invited me into the living room. As expected, my ex-husband was sulking, but a stern word from his father made him reluctantly lower his head. She mentioned that because you only do what you want, her life is in shambles. My father-in-law chastised him. That's when I revealed that I had sought legal advice regarding his constant threats of divorce, which could be deemed emotional abuse. My ex-husband's face drained of color upon hearing this. After some negotiation, we reached an agreement. He would cover the initial costs of the new car and the expenses related to retracting the theft report, with my father-in-law making up the difference. As I was leaving, my mother-in-law expressed regret, saying, "It's a shame we couldn't spend more time together, Cindy." I replied, "If it's all right with you, let's do it again sometime," and took my leave. It turned out that the colleagues my husband had shown off the car to on that fateful day were also present during the accident. They learned everything. The car was registered in my name, we were divorced, and the car had been reported stolen. Gossip spread through his workplace, and he became the subject of ridicule behind his back. Around this time, there was talk of a transfer, which he eagerly accepted due to discomfort in his current role. However, it turned out to be more of a demotion, sending him to a rural area. Expecting convenience stores and laundromats for daily needs, he found nothing nearby. The nearest supermarket was a 30-minute drive away, and there were no laundromats in sight. Recently, Catherine, who had invited me for a meal, expressed hesitancy about asking him how he was managing household chores. She was pleasantly surprised when I agreed to meet her, and now we've developed a close friendship. I'm content now. I've purchased a new car within my budget and enjoy solo trips, just like I did before. I caught you cheating, Susan. I just returned from a business trip when my mother-in-law suddenly came at me with a triumphant grin, accusing me of infidelity. With no recollection whatsoever, I had no choice but to echo her words. She probably thought I was playing dumb, her voice growing stronger as she continued, closing in on a culprit. I had a hidden camera set up in the car. Lately, I've noticed some things left behind that don't belong to our family, men's belongings. Not just once, but several times. I've been suspecting that a man other than a family member has been riding in our car. That's why when you took the dash cam for repair, I was convinced you tried to cover up evidence under the guise of repair, didn't you? Then, she conveniently mentioned my recent business trip, alleging that I had been with an affair partner all this time, ensuring that I wouldn't be caught on the dash cam. But unfortunately for me, she had her own camera set up. "I'm sure everything has been captured on it," she said. "There are 2 cars at my in-laws' house, and one of them was used by everyone living there, which included me. The car designated for everyone's use had an interior dash cam recording details of both road trips and inside the car. My mother-in-law, suspecting my infidelity, had it set up to gather evidence. When I sent it for repairs, she immediately assumed it was to conceal evidence. I was at a loss for words. Why did she suspect me to this extent and confidently assert that I was cheating? Most likely, it was because of my past job as a hostess at a lounge during my college days. My family wasn't wealthy, so I worked as a hostess to pay for my college tuition. My parents suggested I apply for student loans, but I declined. Working as a hostess provided flexible hours, mainly at night, allowing me to plan around my classes and other activities. Socializing with older men provided valuable learning experiences about economic structures and different industries, which proved useful in my current job. When I started dating my husband Mike, he knew about my past but didn't disclose it to his family, especially his conservative mother. However, during a visit to his parents before our marriage, his mother discovered my past job and erupted in outrage, demanding that Mike break up with me. Mike defended me, explaining that I only worked as a hostess serving drinks and having conversations, but his mother's reaction had already tainted her perception of me. "I knew that, so why didn't you tell me?" Mike sighed deeply. "Because I knew this would happen. I was waiting for the right time to talk to you about it." "How did you find out, anyway?" With some hesitation, his mother replied in a faltering tone. "Melissa started talking about how she wanted to work as a hostess to earn money. She apparently came across a top all-time popular hostesses article online and found Susan. Melissa is Mike's younger sister. She's into flashy things, has a tendency to change boyfriends frequently, and definitely fits the typical image of a hostess in general. So it's okay if your own daughter wants to become a hostess, but it's not okay for anyone else." As Mike spoke with a mixture of exasperation and disbelief, his mother's voice grew shrill. "I never said it was okay for her. How rude. But you didn't scold her like this, did you?" "Well, when you brought this woman here the first time, I thought she was a respectable young lady, and I was relieved. I didn't know she was a filthy woman. She deceived us. Susan is indeed very responsible. She worked as a hostess to pay for her tuition, not for mere leisure like Melissa. She didn't neglect her studies and quit right after she graduated. She even secured a position at a reputable company. Her performance at work was even better than mine. At these words, his mother clenched her lips in frustration while I was deeply moved. He stood up for me as I was being condemned. But I couldn't help but feel concerned about the deteriorating relationship between myself and the woman who could become my mother-in-law. Just as I was contemplating the challenges of marrying Mike despite my love for him, he surprised me with a proposal. "But what about your mother? She would absolutely be against us getting married." "Don't worry about her. My dad used to take his clients to lounges with hostess services for business, so he understands. He actually helped me convince my mom." "Really?" "Absolutely." While I was skeptical, Mike was full of confidence. Despite my lingering anxiety, I chose to trust him and nodded in agreement. Our plan was to find a place for the two of us to live together after getting married. Mike, being the second son, always joked that if anyone should live with their parents, it should be the eldest son. His older brother wasn't married at the time but had a fiancée, so I naturally assumed they would be the ones to move in with my in-laws. But then we'd rather have Mike live with us. To my surprise, my mother-in-law, who had previously belittled and criticized me as the filthy woman, was the one who brought up such a proposition. I couldn't fathom her intentions, but since we had already pushed through with the marriage against her wishes, I couldn't refuse when Mike voiced his worries, asking if I was going to be okay. I confidently assured him that I was going to be fine. Shortly after our marriage, we began living in Mike's parents' house. Our newlywed life consisted of living together with my in-laws and sister-in-law. Melissa had actually gotten married a little before us, but her husband was immediately assigned to an overseas business trip, so she remained at her parents' house. Just like Mike said, my father-in-law was understanding and treated me kindly. It helped that I had experience conversing with older men, so our talks were quite engaging. My mother-in-law didn't seem to approve of that aspect of me either. "She's just fooling you, dear." I could hear such backbiting quite frequently. She spread rumors in the neighborhood about me being filthy, and when she saw the designer items I had received during my days as a hostess, she would make snide remarks about my spending habits. At first, Mike and my father-in-law would scold her, but the shrewd woman eventually started to harass me when they weren't around. "Hey, since you're so extravagant with your spending, you shouldn't be keeping money around. Just leave it all to me, and I'll manage it for you." She had the audacity to come to my room and say that, leaving me dumbfounded. I'm not wasting money. These designer items aren't recent purchases. Plus, if I were to entrust anyone with my money, it would be Mike. "You're just deceiving Mike. Even if you gave it to him, you just pester him for money and end up spending it all. I should be the one to hold on to it. Besides, the other day, I witnessed you returning home after drinking with a man. You seem to have a penchant for men, don't you?" That man happened to be my boss. If you work for a company, it's natural to occasionally socialize over drinks, isn't it? Always making excuses, she demanded. "Just hand over your money to me." I was at a loss for words. But since I'm not someone who spends a lot of money in the first place, it wouldn't inconvenience me much even if I were to give her a portion of my salary. So, I replied, "I guess I could give you about half of my salary, but remember, it's my money that you'll be managing, so don't use any of it." "How could you say that? You were really rude." That's how I ended up giving half of my salary to my mother-in-law each month. She would come to my room to collect it, perhaps to keep it a secret from Mike and my father-in-law. Melissa, my sister-in-law, was more favorable towards me. She would approach me in a friendly manner and ask about my days as a hostess or seek advice on her friendships. I appreciated her friendliness, but it wasn't exactly comforting, given that she was far more reckless with her money than me but never got scolded for it. Plus, I noticed that she had been occasionally taking and using my personal belongings without permission. In the beginning, she quietly borrowed them and returned them, but eventually she stopped returning them. My mother-in-law's behavior was escalating as well. She would follow me. On my days off, whenever I interacted with a man, she would take photos, claiming them as evidence of infidelity. She'd share these photos with Mike and my father-in-law, insisting repeatedly that I was having an affair and should be kicked out. "I want to trust you." Mike spoke to me with powerless words that seemed to contradict his true feelings, after being shown evidence of infidelity by my mother-in-law for who knows how many times. "But the number of photos my mom brings to me, isn't it excessive? Have you been meeting men behind my back?" "No way," I interrupted him out of shock. Your mom takes photos of random people I bump into or people asking me for directions, strangers I absolutely don't know. Yeah, you're right, sorry. Mike's voice lacked energy, and I didn't feel he fully believed me. Melissa would buy into everything my mother-in-law said, often commenting, whether maliciously or not, "Susan, you really have a lot of men wrapped around your finger. That's amazing." Her words seemed to be taking a toll on Mike as well. My mother-in-law's boasts about having caught me red-handed came amidst this ongoing tension. I finally got definitive proof of Susan's infertility. With that, she summoned my father-in-law, Mike, and Melissa to watch the hidden camera footage with her. I knew everyone was suspicious of me due to my mother-in-law's outrageous behavior. Even Mike started to think I might be cheating, but just as strongly as my mother-in-law insisted on her evidence, I had absolute confidence that I hadn't done anything wrong. And at that moment, only, I knew about the shocking footage that was about to disappoint my mother-in-law's expectations greatly. My mother-in-law pressed the play button, and immediately the inside of a car was projected on the screen. Everyone except me held their breath. What appeared on screen was, in fact, Melissa indecently dressed and flirting with a man. That's right, I was the only one who knew about this. The man's belongings that did not belong to the family, as my mother-in-law had put it, were the belongings of Melissa's lover. What? Wait, what's going on? My mother-in-law spoke so fast and pressed the pause button on the remote several times, but perhaps due to her panicking, her fingers couldn't actually press the button, and the image of Melissa and Desiree continued to play. Melissa's voice filled the room. "Stop it. Turn it off," she cried out in a voice filled with anguish, on the verge of tears. Why? Why did this happen? But Melissa deleted all the footage from the dash cam. When I opened my mouth, everyone turned to look at me. Clearing my throat, I continued, "Earlier, your mother didn't mention that this footage was from her hidden camera. You let your guard down because you thought you had deleted your own affair from the dash cam, leaving only mine." Melissa, with a look of despair, directed her gaze towards her mother. "Why would she put a hidden camera? That's awful. It's like you're spying. If you wanted to capture Susan's infidelity, you should have at least told me about the camera. And why didn't you check what was being recorded? I can't believe this." Those words sparked anger on Mike's stunned face. "What the heck? You're okay if Susan is the victim of a hidden camera, but not you? Cut the crap. It's okay, Mike," I said, and continued, "You know, Melissa, dash cam data is usually stored on a memory card and can be recovered even after being deleted. The dash cam was acting up, and because I knew that you've been deleting things, I had it restored while it was being repaired. So, your fare is recorded on the dash cam too. Oh, and obviously, there's nothing of mine. I never cheated." Tears swelled up in Melissa's eyes as she stared at me. "Why? Why would you do this to me? We were getting along so well. Normally, you don't just take things that belong to someone you're close to, do you? And didn't you, along with your mother, keep saying that I was having an affair? If it really was a relationship based on mutual respect, we wouldn't do such things to each other. It's only natural to be angry if someone does that. I didn't take anything without permission." Melissa passionately argued to the point of straining her voice, "But such lies won't hold up." "Yes, you have. I even have evidence. You didn't notice the hidden camera in my room that has been set up for a long time now, did you?" "Yes, for a long time." I could see my mother-in-law's body tense up at those words. A smile crept up on my face. "Well, it looks like he finally figured it out. It's captured on camera, the day you came to my room and accused me of being extravagant with money, demanding that I hand over my salary. I even have footage that shows you coming to my room every month to collect the money." My mother-in-law's face turned deep red. "That's because you squander your money. I was just holding on to it for you." "So, where's all this money you've been holding on to for me?" No rebuttal came. My mother-in-law's face remained red, and her teeth clenched in frustration. "I know what you were up to. You've been following me every time I leave the house. But I've also been following you when you go out, and you know what? You've been going to male strip clubs, haven't you? Multiple times a week. You needed money for your addiction." My father-in-law finally spoke up. He looked at my mother-in-law intently, as if pleading with his eyes. She lowered her gaze. "Well, it's true in a way. I may have gone there occasionally. But Susan, can we see the footage from your hidden camera?" When my father-in-law spoke, my mother-in-law unleashed her words as if she had been struck. "There's no need for that. Having a hidden camera in the first place is despicable." "But you did the same, didn't you?" Mike said with a sigh. Moreover, you were the one who placed hidden cameras in the car used by all of us and secretly followed and took photos of Susan. Susan only had a camera in her own room. Which do you think is more despicable? Once again, my mother-in-law seemed at a loss for words. I went to fetch the camera in my room with my father-in-law, and we checked the footage. There was Melissa stealing my belongings and my mother-in-law demanding money and coming to collect it. Everything was recorded. I am truly sorry. Once we finished watching the footage, my father-in-law apologized. Even when I told him it was okay, he wouldn't stop apologizing. Mike joined him and apologized to me as well. I screwed up. I should have stopped Mom from following you and taking photos. I let my own insecurities get the better of me. I'm sorry. He looked up with worried eyes and asked, "Can I still be your husband, Susan?" Of course you can. At my words, Mike finally smiled. My father-in-law demanded my mother-in-law to return the money to me and also served her with divorce papers. Despite her pleas of having no money and begging him not to leave her, my father-in-law was resolute, and they ultimately divorced. She's now working full-time in order to repay me and cover her living expenses. I'm sure she doesn't have any spare time to visit strip clubs anymore. Melissa was kicked out of the house, and her husband, who is still on his business trip abroad, left her as well. It didn't seem like she was particularly bothered by the divorce, perhaps because she had always been averse to being tied down by one man. On the other hand, what seemed to hit her hard was having to repay me for the numerous designer items she stole from me. She finally started working as a hostess, but not being particularly bright or street smart, she doesn't seem to be doing well. There's even talk of her turning into a sex worker to make ends meet. While I can't say for certain, it seems she's desperate to make money. As for me, I'm living happily with Mike and my father-in-law in his home. As expected, conversations with my father-in-law flowed smoothly, and my husband would often ask to join in, maybe because he was jokingly jealous of our relationship. The three of us laugh and enjoy our time together every day. Amidst the jubilant atmosphere of the wedding reception, the mother-in-law took the stage to deliver her anticipated speech. However, what she uttered left the room in stunned silence. With an air of brazenness, she revealed a deeply personal detail: the bride's inability to conceive. In truth, my son knew well of her infertility, but he insisted on this union regardless. She may lack in one aspect, but she excels in her career. So begrudgingly, I consented to their marriage. The shock of her words reverberated through the hall, leaving me speechless in their wake. How could she so callously reduce a woman to her reproductive abilities and then flaunt it before our gathered guests? Oblivious to the distress she had caused, the mother-in-law surveyed the room with a smug expression, unaware of the discomfort her words had wrought. In the hushed aftermath, my name, Catherine, seemed to echo with a weighty significance. A 31-year-old professional in the dynamic realm of product development, I thrive in my career, contributing to several successful projects. Despite outward contentment, there's a secret burden I carry, one I dare not share with anyone. 5 years ago, I received the crushing news. I was infertile. The revelation left me reeling with shock and despair. In those dark days, I grappled with feelings of worthlessness and the loss of hope for any semblance of a future. Even my then-boyfriend couldn't weather the storm, ultimately ending our relationship. Overwhelmed by sorrow and frustration, I threw myself into my work, seeking solace in its demands to drown out the relentless echo of despair. Looking back, I realized I was merely evading reality, clinging to the refuge of productivity to shield myself from the painful truth. Yet amidst the turmoil, a glimmer of hope emerged. Through unwavering dedication, a product I poured myself into became a resounding success, elevating my standing at work. Convinced that marriage was now beyond my grasp due to my infertility, I resigned myself to the solitary path of societal contribution through labor. Then, a serendipitous encounter altered the course of my destiny. In a routine meeting for product development, I crossed paths with David, a man my age from a client company. Little did I know he would become the harbinger of change in my life. David, the son of his company's president and head of the planning department, and I swiftly exchanged contact information. Initially, our interactions were confined to professional matters, but gradually, our conversations transcended the confines of business, blossoming into a romantic connection. In David, I discovered an unexpected reservoir of love and kindness that I had long deemed unattainable. However, the specter of my infertility loomed large, a secret I dared not disclose for fear of losing him. Yet, as our relationship deepened, the weight of my silence grew heavier, gnawing at my conscience. How could I keep such a fundamental truth from someone who regarded me with unwavering sincerity? Uncertain of the outcome, yet determined to be transparent about my condition, I braced myself for the inevitable. Summoning courage, I disclosed my infertility to David, fully prepared for the possibility of his departure. Despite my resolve, anxiety gnawed at my insides as I broached the subject. To my astonishment, David's reaction wasn't what I anticipated. Tears welled in his eyes as he offered me solace, expressing gratitude for my honesty. His unwavering kindness moved me to tears, etching the moment into my memory like an indelible mark. Contrary to my fears, our relationship only flourished after that pivotal conversation. 2 years later, on a momentous evening at a restaurant, David presented me with a small case, unveiling a ring that glittered with promise. "Catherine, will you marry me?" His unexpected proposal ignited a whirlwind of emotions within me, joy mingled with apprehension. "David, are you certain? I can't bear children. Can you truly accept that?" Though David comprehends my predicament, the weight of marriage introduces a new dimension of uncertainty. I couldn't readily say yes to his proposal, burdened by doubts. "It doesn't matter, Catherine. I want us to navigate life's challenges together, to weather every storm side by side," David reassured, acknowledging my concerns with unwavering support. In that poignant moment, tears flowed freely, a testament to the emotions swirling within me. Since the day I received my diagnosis, I never envisioned this future. Yet in David's unwavering love, I found the courage to embrace it. With certainty in my heart, I'd accepted his proposal, ready to face whatever lay ahead, as long as we faced it together. "I share your sentiment, David. Thank you for your unwavering care. I eagerly anticipate the journey ahead of us," I replied, gratitude laced in my words as we embarked on the path to wedded bliss. With the proposal accepted, we wasted no time in setting the wheels in motion for our impending nuptials. As a woman in her 30s, the prospect of becoming a wife ignited a sense of urgency within me, eager as I was to intertwine our lives officially. Funny how swiftly one wishes to hasten time once the promise of matrimony is extended. The reality of marriage loomed closer, heightening my anticipation with each passing moment. However, before exchanging vows, we had to confront a significant hurdle: meeting David's parents. While our encounters with them had been brief in the past, this meeting carried weight as we prepared to divulge news of our engagement. Unfortunately, the reception of our impending union was far from smooth sailing. While David's father greeted the news with joy, his mother maintained a stern countenance throughout the exchange. When the moment came for her to express her thoughts, her opposition to our marriage was palpable. "Catherine, I cannot condone your marriage to David," she declared, her disapproval evident in her demeanor. Perplexed, David interjected, seeking clarity. "Why?" he pressed, prompting his mother to elaborate. Fixing me with a steely gaze, she broached the crux of her objection. "Your inability to bear children," she stated bluntly, laying bare the very fear I had hoped to avoid. Though prepared for reproach, the directness of her words pierced me deeply, leaving me momentarily speechless. "You comprehend, don't you? David is poised to inherit the company. It's only natural that we expect his wife to bear an heir. Marrying someone incapable of fulfilling that role is out of the question," she asserted, her tone unwavering in its refusal to accept our union. Aware of David's imminent ascension to the helm of the family company, I understood the weighty expectations placed upon him, particularly the desire for him to produce an heir. Yet David's proposal to me had been made with full knowledge of these circumstances. While the prospect of not having children with him weighed heavily on my heart, our decision to marry had been a mutual one, made despite these challenges. Thus, his mother's words struck a painful chord within me, their sharpness magnified by the stark reality they laid bare. "It was me who insisted that it didn't matter," David interjected, his defense of me unwavering. "Please, mother, refrain from laying blame on Catherine. Our choices should not be disregarded in this manner," he implored, coming to my defense when words failed me. Even David's father, visibly perturbed by his wife's harsh words, expressed his discontent. "How could you utter such words?" he admonished her. Despite their protests, his mother remained resolute, her stance unchanged. "I speak the truth," she asserted defiantly before excusing herself from the table, signaling an end to the discussion. Although our conversation yielded no resolution that day, it failed to shake our steadfast commitment to each other. Determined to formalize our commitment despite his mother's resistance, we opted to register our marriage with his father's blessing. Recognizing that waiting for her approval might indefinitely delay our union, we took the decisive step forward. My mother's objections hold no sway over us, David assured me. I'm the one who desires this marriage. Let's remain patient, she'll come around eventually. Thus, David and I became husband and wife, yet his mother remained steadfast in her refusal to acknowledge our union. I'll never accept this. I refuse to attend any ceremony, she declared adamantly, escalating the tension further. In light of her unwavering stance, we postponed the wedding ceremony, clinging to the hope of winning her acceptance before celebrating our love publicly. Day after day, his father endeavored to sway her opinion, while David and I persisted in our appeals, pouring our hearts into each plea. Despite our efforts, her resolve remained unyielding. In a bid to soften her stance, my parents also visited his family numerous times, joining the chorus of voices imploring her to reconsider. Even some of David's relatives weighed in, urging her to embrace our union. Finally, after an onslaught of earnest appeals from all quarters, she relented. At long last, we could proceed with the wedding ceremony, our hearts brimming with gratitude for the collective efforts that led to this moment of acceptance. Despite lingering discontent, David and I pressed on with our wedding preparations and finally settled on a date, marking it a year from the day we officially registered our marriage, effectively our inaugural wedding anniversary. As the long-awaited day approached, a palpable sense of relief washed over us, culminating in the arrival of our wedding day itself. Filled with an overwhelming mix of emotions, I stood on the brink of tears, elated at the prospect of finally donning the wedding dress I had nearly abandoned. It felt surreal, like the culmination of a cherished dream. The ceremony unfolded seamlessly within the sacred confines of the church, setting the stage for a joyous reception. Surrounded by the warm embrace of well-wishers, I found myself enveloped in a cocoon of happiness. It was all thanks to David, whose unwavering support had guided me through moments of doubt and self-doubt, reminding me of my worthiness of love and marriage. Watching David, resplendent in his finery, exuding an aura of strength and reliability, filled my heart with an indescribable sense of contentment. Yet, as the festivities progressed and we prepared for a brief interlude, I caught sight of his mother ascending the stage, evidently seeking permission to address the gathering. And thus she embarked on her own discourse. "Thank you all for joining us in celebrating my son's wedding today," began the mother-in-law, her words slicing through the air like a chilling wind. "The truth is, the bride is unable to conceive, and I've harbored reservations about their union from the start." Her words struck me like a thunderbolt, freezing me in place as I contemplated the audacity of her disclosure on this joyous occasion. The once lively atmosphere in the venue dissolved into a stifling silence. However, she continued, undeterred, "My son was adamant, and so I reluctantly acquiesced to their marriage." In the midst of the hushed hall, her voice resonated with a chilling finality. Despite David's attempts to intervene, his mother clung to the microphone, forging ahead with her tirade. "You see, I may never have the joy of holding a grandchild in my arms. Can you fathom such a sorrowful predicament? Truly, I fail to comprehend his choice in a partner like this." Stunned by her relentless onslaught of cruelty, I struggled to find my voice as David grappled with his own emotions beside me. Then, with a callous laugh, she delivered the final blow. "Yes, as you can plainly see, my daughter-in-law is barren, but she's successful in her career, so I reluctantly consented to their union. Ha ha ha." Her laughter reverberated through the hall, a bitter echo of her disdain. As her gaze bore into me, she delivered one last venomous barb. "You ought to be grateful. This day owes its existence to me." With a smug satisfaction evident on her face, the mother-in-law resumed her seat, her disgraceful speech concluded. Had there ever been a more offensive display? Stunned into silence, I scarcely registered the murmurs swirling around me. Urged by David and the venue staff, I was guided out of the hall, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and indignation. Once inside the dressing room, the floodgates of suppressed emotions burst open. Anger, sorrow, a profound sense of disappointment at the desecration of our long-awaited ceremony. Each emotion crashed over me in relentless waves, threatening to engulf me entirely. I never want to lay eyes on that woman again. I refuse to share a space with someone so callous. I declared, my voice trembling with raw emotion as I shed the wedding attire, opting instead for the comfort of my own clothes. This is enough. I'm going home, I announced to David, my resolve unyielding as I stormed out of the dressing room, my footsteps echoing with determination. Catherine, please, just wait. David's pleas fell on deaf ears as I hastily hailed a waiting taxi at the venue's entrance. Take me home, I instructed the driver, my voice laced with a fervent urgency. Humiliated and incensed by my mother-in-law's public humiliation, all I desired was to escape from the scene of the ordeal as swiftly as possible. Our new home, just a brief 5-minute drive from the wedding venue, provided a sanctuary amidst the storm of emotions that engulfed me. Stepping across the threshold, the floodgates I had desperately held shut burst open, tears streaming down my cheeks unchecked. Never had I imagined I would endure such cruelty on what should have been the happiest day of my life. The joy of yesterday had swiftly transformed into the bitterest despair, leaving me reeling in disbelief. It wasn't a choice to bear my infertility, let alone to have it laid bare before a crowd of onlookers, especially on such a sacred occasion. As I struggled to compose myself, David entered. Catherine, I'm truly sorry. Please forgive me. I never anticipated my mother's hurtful words. I'm sorry I couldn't shield you from her cruelty. David's voice was laden with remorse as he bowed deeply before me, seeking my forgiveness. He explained that as the groom, he felt powerless to confront his mother's deplorable behavior. Aware of David's inherent decency, I harbored no ill will toward him. It was his mother who bore the blame for this affront, not him. Please, Catherine, let's return to the wedding. I've asked my father to keep my mother away from the venue. They're occupied with the guests during the dress change, and we still have time to salvage the reception. I refuse to let this day end in ruin, David implored, his earnest plea reaching me through the haze of my turmoil. I nodded in acquiescence, choosing to place my trust in David's assurances. I couldn't bear to inflict further pain upon him, my staunch supporter and understanding companion. Moreover, the thought of tarnishing the reception we had meticulously planned together weighed heavily on my conscience. Offering David my apology for hastily retreating, we embarked on the journey back to the venue. In the taxi, our hands intertwined, a silent vow passing between us to weather this storm and see our wedding reception through to its rightful conclusion. Upon our return to the family waiting room, we found my mother-in-law surrounded by relatives, her exhaustion palpable as she bore the weight of their collective reproach. Catching sight of my presence, she approached me with an air of contrition. Oh, Catherine, I'm terribly sorry. Can we simply pretend that dreadful incident never occurred? Her voice took on a pleading tone, her head bowed slightly in a gesture of supplication. It was a stark departure from the smug countenance she had worn at the reception. Why? How can you even suggest such a thing after the humiliation you inflicted in front of everyone? How can you expect us to simply forget? My anger flared in me with her audacity, her attempt at reconciliation ringing hollow in my ears. The notion of forgiveness felt like an insult after the disgrace she had wrought. Why seek forgiveness now when you never truly accepted me to begin with? If you were so opposed, why not simply let things be? I voiced my refusal to acquiesce to her plea, my resolve unyielding as I prepared to return to the ceremony. Don't be like that. I'm apologizing, so why won't you forgive me? My mother-in-law's words hung in the air, laced with frustration and confusion. I had no idea that one of your relatives was a key client of our company. It turns out, my maternal uncle oversees a significant client of my father-in-law's company. While I was away, he gave mother-in-law quite the dressing down. He even hinted at severing the business transaction. Thanks to my father-in-law's desperate apologies, the situation was barely kept under control. In that moment, clarity dawned upon me like a sudden revelation. Mother-in-law's apology wasn't born of genuine remorse but rather self-preservation. I was rendered speechless by the realization of her motives. It was then that David, who had observed our exchange in silence, finally interjected. Mom, is that your idea of an apology? Aren't you disrespecting Catherine too much? And you're apologizing to her simply because you were reprimanded by a client? David's voice, usually calm and composed, rang out with an uncharacteristic edge of frustration. My mother-in-law, taken aback by his sudden outburst, stared blankly in response. Do you comprehend the magnitude of the pain you've caused Catherine, Mom? David's voice rang out, filled with a raw intensity that echoed through the room. You exposed her most sensitive issue in front of everyone at our wedding. As a human being, that's the lowest of lows, regardless of the circumstances. It's inexcusable. You casually brought up someone's health struggles like it was nothing. David's words surged forth, an unrelenting torrent of pent-up emotions directed squarely at his mother. He spared no detail, laying bare the hurt she had inflicted upon me, time and time again, wielding my infertility as a weapon. Today's egregious display at the reception had been the final straw. David's gaze bore into his mother with a mixture of disgust and disappointment. "I'm through with you. Consider yourself disowned if you can't accept Catherine as my wife. That's your issue to grapple with. Your words hold no sway over us. Our family's affairs are no concern of outsiders." With unwavering resolve, David severed ties with his mother in a single, decisive proclamation. There was no ambiguity in his declaration. He wanted no part in her life from this moment forward. As far as he was concerned, she was no longer his mother. "David, please, don't say such things. I want to celebrate with you. Let's not dwell on anger, all right? I won't utter another word. Let's try to salvage the mood and enjoy the rest of the wedding together, shall we?" His mother's complexion paled at David's words. Her attempts to gauge his reaction met with futility. Despite her frantic efforts to placate him, it was evident that nothing she could say would sway David's resolve. "Today isn't just about me, it's about Catherine too. We're a team. We're inseparable. Disrespecting Catherine is akin to disrespecting me. I understand that you have no desire to celebrate our union, so I suggest you leave now." David's tone was unwavering, his words cutting through the air with an icy precision. Her apologies rang hollow. Mere attempts at self-preservation devoid of any genuine remorse towards me. David, with a merciless resolve, ordered her to depart, asserting that I was his sole family. "I can't believe this, David," his mother murmured in disbelief, her expression a mixture of shock and bewilderment. Clearly caught off guard by her son's unequivocal rejection, she found herself standing alone, alienated by David, David's father, and the rest of the relatives. With no allies left and facing the harsh reality of her situation, she reluctantly conceded defeat, her only recourse being to retreat from the scene. Once she had departed, I swiftly changed into a fresh dress, taking David's hand as we made our way back to the venue, united in our resolve. Though they remained unaware of the turmoil that had transpired, the guests greeted our return with a warm round of applause. It was evident that they had sensed the gravity of the situation and graciously awaited our return. I was deeply moved by their understanding and grateful for the comforting embrace of their warm reception. With my mother-in-law absent, the wedding reception flowed seamlessly. As David and I prepared to deliver our closing remarks, we took a moment to extend a heartfelt apology for the disruption caused earlier. With that, we successfully wrapped up the festivities without further interruption. True to David's resolve, we made the decision to cut all ties with my mother-in-law. David changed his contact details, ensuring no further communication could reach us. He even suggested we relocate, despite our recent settlement into our new home. Recognizing David's unwavering determination, I agreed to the move. The relocation expenses were graciously covered by my father-in-law, citing the troubles caused by my mother-in-law. With his support, we swiftly made the transition to our new residence. Once our move was finalized, my father-in-law took decisive action and served my mother-in-law with divorce papers. He, too, had grown weary of her mistreatment towards me, and the incident at the wedding was the final straw. Although a sincere apology managed to salvage our relationship with our uncle, who also happened to be a business associate, he had reached his limit with my mother-in-law's behavior. Consequently, she was expelled from the family home, left to forge a solitary path forward. Since David and I cut ties with my mother-in-law, we've been left in the dark about her whereabouts and well-being. From what we've heard through whispers and hearsay, it seems her disgraceful behavior at the wedding left her with no familial support. She's said to be enduring a solitary and difficult existence, scraping by in a modest apartment and working multiple part-time jobs from dawn till dusk just to make ends meet. Meanwhile, David and I are relishing in the tranquility of our married life. Though we hadn't been blessed with children, we find solace and contentment in our companionship. We're confident that as long as we continue to cherish and support each other, our bond will only grow stronger with each passing day. With this unwavering belief, we face our future hand in hand, filled with hope and anticipation for the life we're building together.